good morning, good day, and good evening. This is actually take two of this podcast because last week was something, but
Yeah,
yeah. How about you just introduce yourself again now that everyone's actually going to hear this?
yeah. Thanks for having me. Welcome, everyone.
Absolute pleasure.
My name is René. My name is René Rebe, coming to you from Germany, and I'm a 25-year Linux developer. Started around 1998-ish with Rock Linux of all Linux distributions, and basically did touch most major open source projects since then. So Linux kernel, glibc, GCC, and still run the successor of this Linux distribution today, T2 System Development Environment, T2 SDE.
Mhm.
Linux, that is not yet another Linux distribution, but actually a very flexible build kit, or some call it meta distribution.
Mhm.
And probably as an introduction, what is so special, because so many people, of course, like, why yet another Linux distribution? Like, hey, we're doing this for 25 years. But also we support all CPU architectures from ARM to x86 over RISC-V, PowerPC, Spark, MIPS, some collection. And yeah, that's basically, I guess, introduction. And thanks for having me. And let's see what we talk about today.
Well, when people say this is just another distro, I think people forget how few distros really were around back in, so that would have been 1999, 2000, yes?
Before that, yeah, I think Rock Linux was started by Claire here in Austria. I think 1990 is like summer of 1996 or so, and I got there relatively early, like within. So I'm for sure contributed to Rock Linux 1998, and at that time it was already in magazines and stuff, and international. We had international developers and stuff from America, even Singapore, and so on. So 1998 was already. It was going, so it was before the year 2000 for sure.
So before we can get into your stuff, can you give just like a brief explanation of what Rock Linux was? Because I'm sure most people probably haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, sure. Although Rock Linux was a little bit more popular back in the day. So in the 2000s, there were like, instead of like I always joke we have 2,000 or probably more Linux distributions. So back in the early days, there were like maybe only 2 dozens or so. Many of the early ones you have never heard about, or DLS, or I mean, of course, Slackware, and so on. I think Red Hat was even based on some other, probably, whatever that was. And so Rock Linux was one of the few unique Linux distributions, and it was like one of the early source distributions, like similar to Gentoo. I think Gentoo was probably invented some month after, also 1996, somewhere there. So it's because people was like, yeah, why don't you just Gentoo? I mean, first of all, it's entirely different, and it's like it's as old, right? So
Right.
And so these were the early Linux distributions, and many of the others, like just last year, the things with Red Hat, and people forking it even more, even the Oracle and SUSE and alliances and so on. Most Linux distributions are actually simply forks, right? Like just a copy of another one. And Rock Linux or Slackware and Debian and others are actually those original inventions of.
Even in the case of Slackware and Debian, they technically were a fork of I'm blanking on the name now, but
or SLS, or actually
yes, SLS.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, I was super young. I mean, I was at school, right? It's like running Linux distribution from school. People always don't believe me because, like, hey, I started when I was in school. So it's like, you're not doing this for 25 years. Like, yeah, sure. And yeah, even those details. I mean, 2000 distributions, I start to, like, this starts to decay. Even I would need to open Wikipedia for the details. So, but yeah, it's one of those true original distributions. And the reason I found this, so I actually started, so I grew up with DOS. So the funny thing is, we had totally no Unix. I don't know probably how it is for most normal people. Like my neighbors and like my parents or neighbors, like nobody had Unix, right? Like I didn't even know that existed. I mean, like I grew up with a 286 and then quickly 386 of my father's. And so I did everything on, like I started majorly on the 386 SX25 with 2 megabyte of memory. And initially not even a hard drive, starting out with floppies. And I've not even seen the greatest graphics because 386 didn't do much graphics.
Right.
And only neighbors had like an Amiga 500, right? And I only knew like the highest end graphics I knew were the Amiga 500 graphics of our neighbor. And so I didn't even know that Unix existed. So when I only found this Linux through magazines, and like I tried some, because back in that day, the magazines sometimes came with some Linux CD on the cover, right? And like I tried Debian, and like in 1996 or 1995, 1996, it wasn't that amazing. And it's like coming from DOS and Windows, it's like, yeah, it's interesting, but like Due is that hard and cursed. And then I even purchased the SUSE back in the day, the big German Linux distribution. And this was like better, but still, yeah. And this is how I found Rock Linux. Right? I thought like, it's an interesting concept, but it could be so much more. And so that is how, also from a magazine, I found Rock Linux back in the day and started contributing there. Like it was basically because it was a source, you could build it because you couldn't just build SUSE or you couldn't just build Debian. And I wanted to change some things. And this is how I came to the source distribution that is Rock Linux and started there and basically did the desktop stuff there. So basically did the desktop Rock Linux since then, until it continued to in 2003, I believe, this continued into this more professional targeted T2, which is the only successor of the Rock Linux line of source distribution.
So what was it that initially drew you to Linux? Was it just this cool thing that you saw in this magazine? It's like, oh, I like DOS, I like messing around with computers. Or was there something specific about it that really grabbed your attention?
Yeah. So the thing is, so my friend and I, so it's crazy that, today everything looks so easy, right? You just Google some stuff and Wikipedia and OSDev.org and stuff.
Yep.
So like back in the day, we had to teach all our stuff with books from the library, and like there were only like 2 computer geeks in this town back in the day, like my neighbor and I, right? Like we basically started game developing and the demo scene stuff. And like we did like when we were like 13 or so, like we did high performance assembly on 386 and tried to get the most out of VGA graphic. And we wanted to start an own operating system because like we were developing on DOS, and DOS obviously sucked except for gaming, and Windows sucked even more. Like basically like in 1990s, like every advanced thing in Windows like crashed. Like you did something advanced, it crashed. And like that is why I am not touching Windows anymore. Yes, it's 25 years since then, but nonetheless, so this is why like Windows was for us a crashing experience, and we wanted to do 3D graphics in Windows 95, and surprise, like every API call you did like crashed. Yes, this were the early days of 3D graphics, but like, and my friend and I like, dude, how can this suck so much? Like, why does it crash like all the time? You can't even, like, how should we do a 3D game with this crashing stuff? And so we were longing for a more stable operating system. And we were on the verge to write our own. Like basically, we were sitting here with an Intel. Like we called Intel Munich here in Germany. It's like 14-year-old or so. It's like we would like some hardware reference specification of your processors. And like this time when Intel sent you like some thick book and it's like protected mode, and it's like, okay, how do we program this stuff? And then we discovered like we were like sitting in the basement starting our operating system, and then because we wanted something more stable than Windows. And we didn't even know, we never probably heard of Unix, right? Like with all the books we read, and there was, I think we have not even seen a Macintosh. So rare this expensive stuff was, at least in Germany, right? Not growing up in Silicon Valley. So I did not even knew probably that Apple existed from books and the library and stuff. So we were thrilled to find like, hey, someone else has done this protected mode system that's not constantly crashing. And like, hey, let's use this as a base and see what we can do with it.
So you were like, Windows sucks. It's made by this multi-billion-dollar company. We're just going to do it better.
Yeah, or to be fair, like back in the day, Microsoft wasn't that big, right?
Back in the day, multi-million-dollar company, we'll say.
Yeah, okay, they were. Yeah, but Windows 3.0 was really not that amazing.
Sure.
But yeah, obviously, like fast forward a decade later, obviously, Microsoft became pretty rich. But given the business practices and stuff and marketing and so on, But like, I mean, but we grew up with DOS, right? I mean, and subjectively or objectively, DOS is not a very sophisticated operating system, right? So we mostly knew DOS and the graphic front end, and that, like, even to 14-year-old looked like, I mean, I can understand Steve Jobs, who's like, dude, what are they trying to copy there at Microsoft? Like, this Windows DOS extension. It's like, but sure. I mean, Windows NT, Windows NT 3, 4, I mean, obviously were more stable than Windows 3.0 and 95. But I mean, to be fair, I mean, obviously everyone knows from history how unstable Windows 95 was, right? It was just not a true protected mode operator or fully protected mode system throughout. So, but I mean, it's like Linus Torvalds, right? It's like Linus Torvalds, like, hey, this stuff is expensive or sucks and stuff. It's like, let's do our own. Just basically some 6 years later, chiming in there on the big Linux movement.
So you found your way to Linux, you found your way to rock Linux. How did T2 come about from that?
T2 basically, as often with projects, basically, so I did the desktop part and I became stable release maintainer. And as some who saw me on YouTube and Twitch last years probably see how much time it takes to put in there to get everything working and do a little bit marketing and so on. And so something that Rock Linux became a little bit frustrating. Like Claire wanted to do some web, like basically what is GitHub today. Like she wanted like some subversion front end and like all patches go through there and stuff. And I was like, dude, my to-do is like so long. And like, I can't like each patch. So some people would say like, hey, continuous integration and quality and stuff. But there were also some personal things that I wasn't even aware of, right? Like in retrospect, had I known some things that were going on, I only learned this later. So the frustration was probably accelerated due to some other things going on that I was not even aware of. And so that is why eventually I and many professionals who used Rock Linux for embedded work said, okay, we better fork this. And like most developers continued with T2, which, fun fact, was only a temporary. Now, like T2 stands for like try to or technology 2. It was only meant as like, okay, it's all placeholder name, but within a year, everyone used it. I mean, everyone who knew about it used it. It's like, okay, we keep this name. It was only temporary, but tech people not good in marketing. And within a year, probably Rock Linux, because within a year, like nobody was left at Rock Linux, I would probably say, which is a little bit sad. I mean, now Claire, of course, does super successful things. Like Claire, for those who don't know, Claire Wolf, she reverse engineered the FPGA bitstream stuff. Like maybe it was even, I mean, I just wish I had known some things back in the day, which I only learned a decade later. I learned some stuff, right? But maybe in the end, it's even better for everyone because Claire became highly successful in FPGA. She and her team and friends and everyone in the open source sphere did amazing work with reverse engineering all the FPGA stuff and writing the whole open source Yosys FPGA toolchain. Or maybe soon more than FPGA, probably ASIC, maybe also like all the open source, silicon toolchain and stuff. And probably it was meant to be, but in retrospect, of course, it could be different. I wish it would be different, but it is what it is. I also only wish, like, for example, like that domains would not have been let slap, and like now probably some domain grabbers have the domain, which would have been cool if they said like, hey, we abandon this now, like, hey, do you want to have the domain? I always like this when you open some historic stuff and you get to the right things and not some advertising site. Which is similar. I still need to try to contact the T2 Linux people because the open source people who did the Apple T2.
I was going to bring that up because now if you search for T2 Linux, you don't find T2 SDE. It's only the T2 stuff for that. Yeah, that's a little bit unfortunate. I mean, I see why. I mean, they came much later, right? Probably like a decade later or so. I mean,
the fun thing is like every big company used the T2 name, which even Apple T2, and there was even Sun Microsystems, Niagara Falls T2. There were even digital video broadcasting chips. That's a little bit unfortunate. I only hope that I see already in the future one day the T2 Linux people will stop their Intel work, and maybe they could pass the domain on. And that's always would have been nice if we don't rename this. Maybe we should rename it someday to something more flashy than.
Well, you did say it was a placeholder, but I think that
it was a
it was a placeholder 25 years ago.
Yeah, then first Sun Microsystems did a CPU. Then Apple did some SOC, some system on chip, and who knows what? Like it's maybe eventually.
The problem is if you rename it, like you have to then think of a name.
Yeah, and like all the decades of marketing, and then it's even more confusing. Like Z thing, formerly known as T2 and stuff. I also thought in the end it's not important. Like name is name. It's like so what? It's people who want to find it, and I don't know, but maybe that's always so much things to think about, including the name.
So when the project continued off of Rock Linux, was it initially just basically a continuation of the project, or has the goals of T2 SDE evolved from what Rock Linux was trying to do?
So initially we forked it with the initial goal to make it more professional for more embedded development, because what most people also don't know. So it's basically because people often don't quite understand. And so what it's basically, it's like build root on steroids, or like more Linux from scratch, more automated, or like Gen 2, but for more cross compilation. So that is what when we forked this in 2003 or so, the focus was more professional embedded development, like for like your next ARM board, right? Like ARM or whatnot board here, right? My desk is full with embedded stuff. Like cross compiling, like basically, that's also why how most people with T2 made a living. They did embedded projects like satellite receivers. We did carrier grade baseband stations there. I think I heard that even some hotel chain used it in IPTV in Austria, but that's not me. I only heard this. A Swiss company used it for archiving. Even a company used it for some telephone. That's also not something I've done. Only other developers. Because T2 supported Blackfin DSPs, like basically we support everything. So because we were the only ones supporting analog devices, ADI, right? Analog devices, Blackfin DSPs. It was used for this telephone voice over IP PBXs. I can't even know where it's used, right? Like it's like build root, and people use it for embedded projects, right? And that's what it's mostly meant to. What the main target of T2, but we always continued to support server virtualization and desktop. So we all major core developers always have run it on the desk. And I'm live streaming from T2, right? Like today. So it's fully featured desktop too. The embedded distributions that you can also run on your server and desktop.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So, well, one of the things that you did mention earlier on is the hardware support, and I don't know if you want to get into that now, because I know you've got a lot to say about the way the Linux kernel doesn't handle hardware support. I know you've ranted a lot about this, and I've seen it on at least 2 different streams so far. So, if you want to, some years ago I got to YouTube. So the funny thing is, some years ago I got into YouTube live streaming and even like live streaming development and commentary. And now I'm, of course, like after 5 years live on YouTube and Twitch, like more people know me for being the Linux influencers for my Linux distribution. But
running a Linux distribution for so long, certainly, I mean, not only I've seen most things, if not everything, but I mean, most things. I also have most hardware that I run on a daily basis, like SGI and Sun and stuff, PS3. That gives me a pretty deep insight into how things really are and what most people only know from the surface from news sites.
So, well, one thing I've seen you bring up before is the kernel cutting out drivers, which, from your experience, just continue to work. And it seems like they're cutting it, but it doesn't seem to make sense why they're cutting it.
Yeah, that happens a couple of times. So the biggest recently was, of course, Itanium support, which, of course, we still support. It started with 386. The minimum is 486. They also deleted already Spark version 7, the initial Spark, the earliest commercial Spark from Sun from 1990, which I also have in my collection, like all those vintage and retro YouTubers. And I mean, dropping 386 and Spark version 7 probably makes more sense than dropping Itanium, because Itanium was sold until 3 or so years ago, which makes it like just sold and still probably in operation in banks and insurances, and like probably some NASA space telescope stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like Itanium make completely no sense to me. This 1990 stuff I can somewhat understand. The Spark version 7 certainly more cursed. Like Spark version 7 doesn't even have hardware multiply and divide.
Right.
Spark version 7 only has some multiplication step functions. So if you need to multiply 32-bit, you need to run an S multiplication, like mul S or so, like 32 times or whatnot. Spark version 7 was limited. 386. I understand the kernel developers don't want to maintain super old support, and like it's for 386, it's more like atomics, probably had less wide atomics and stuff for modern algorithms. But that kind of thing's okay. But Itanium, it was just sold recently.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia article. It says 2019 it discontinued.
Yeah, and it fully worked, right? Like when they deleted it, like friends of T2, they even mailed, say like, hey, it works, and hey, we want to maintain it. It wasn't me personally. For example, Frank and Thomas. And they wrote like, hey, it works, and like, okay, we can maintain it, and like they deleted it anyway, right? It's not like, and like it worked, right? The only like on all the hardware we have, like, and that's the crazy stuff. Like we are only like the Itanium team is like a team of 3 that I'm aware of, like my Itanium circle, and like we have, and maybe we have six machines or so, or 7, and like all except one worked, and the one that didn't boot, they fixed. Like I think Frank or Thomas, like one of them, they fixed it in an afternoon. Like it was literally like one uninitialized memory thing, and it's not like it wasn't unfixable, right? Like the only machine that didn't boot was an afternoon job to fix for uninitialized memory, and so all the other machines worked the day they deleted it, and we keep maintaining it, right? Until now, it's just rediffing this patch. It's probably 3 megabyte patch of just restoring it. The most minimal things, which us hobbyists, us DIY influencers at home, it's like, it takes no time, right? It's you drink a coffee and it's rebased, right? It's not like people are saying it takes so much effort to maintain. It's like no, it's just work. It barely changed anything. It's there. We run the latest kernel 6.9. It boots on Itanium fine, right? And we will support it. We've written this on the website. We will support this another decade or two, just because for fun and because we can for fun. I have actually on my to-do, so I don't have so many machines are very long. I've collected over the years, like the O2, SGI02, SGI Octane, PS3, other Power PC and Spark gear. Many things I have for a decade. The Itanium I only have since last year. It was working, however, so other people were using it, but like now it's deleted. Like, hey, do you want this titanium? It's like, sure, of course I want to have this titanium. And I have on my list like gaming on titanium. Like, you will see this on my YouTube channel, right? We will play some games. We will run desktop Linux. We have Firefox to restore support. I mean, yeah, okay, Firefox does not have titanium support anymore, but sure, but that's not the main kernel. So everything else works. And there's other thing, for example, what else was recently? Right, PCMCIA. So I mean, they deleted or even older Wi-Fi cards.
Yeah. I think the PS3 was on the list of the chopping block for that initial list.
Yeah, and so with PCMCIA, I mean, they also just work, right? Of course, I don't use them daily, but of course I have an Apple. I mean, given I maintain PowerPC stuff for 20 years, of course I have. I mean, I don't have the most. Even I have only. I have 3 Apple. Oh no, okay. I have 4 or 5 Apple PowerPC machines left, like a Cube, maybe a Cube. And these are super nice machines, right? Like, that's the difference. Sure, you can't like AAA game on them, like, but you can, like, they were high-end machines. Sure, it's 20 years ago, but there are people who just like their vintage cars, right? That's my favorite comparison. It's like, hey, if you drive some vintage Porsche, Ferrari, and stuff, and I just like, it's like a museum, like a living museum, and theoretically, I could daily drive them, except internet is a little bit slow, or rendering websites is a little bit slow. But otherwise, like, I could 90% of my software I could develop still on these machines, and I do once a week just for YouTube content and fun, right? And I was surprised. I mean, the problem is most people don't realize this until it's deleted, because even I sometimes hear this in the news. I don't read every Linux kernel mailing list message. Like, I took the Apple PowerBook out for testing, and I was like, where's my Wi-Fi driver, right? Why does Wi-Fi not work anymore? It's like, oh, it's deleted, cool. And I restored the patch and it worked, right? So sure, it doesn't have the latest and greatest crypto, which is not ideal, but like for some testing and stuff, it's the same for the PS3. It's basically the same. And it's not like, I mean, yeah, for most, I mean, but there's still even PS3, right? The fun fact, the most new users T2 currently gains are through all the vintage and retro support, right? All the Apple, Power, Macintosh, Titanium, PS3, obviously, which is also the last people who maintain this is in T2. And as a funny thing is, now that I finally, with my YouTube content creation, have a little bit side income financing this, because otherwise I couldn't sit down a whole month and write a 3D tutorial, right? The irony is, like, now that I finally have like some free time and YouTube finance stuff of like, hey, we could finally write this 3D driver, which we could have ever written, and now they want to delete it, right? It's like, you can still use it. It's sure a little bit low memory, but yeah, the irony is every Titanium and Power Macintosh has more memory than a PS3, but at 256 megabyte is, yes, it's very compromised. It was compromised in 2006. It's more compromised today, but it's still a fun system, right? And on the other end, they add totally superfluous support for Nintendo 64, right? Like,
wait,
why do they?
Wait, what? I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, someone at home has written support for Nintendo 64. And they send it upstreams like, hey, here's support for Nintendo 64. And they was like, okay, cool, we apply it, right? And I mean, that's cool. I mean, that is, in my opinion, that is the way it should be, right?
Right.
And I would also, like, my stand would be, as long, like, just leave the drivers in there, as long as it doesn't take a full-time job to maintain them. Like, if it's just there and just lives there, just let it live. And like, sure, if it becomes super annoying to maintain, which in my opinion it is not, right? They barely, like, many things they delete, they didn't touch for 10 years. Like, nobody touched it in 10 years. Like, yeah, but it's working, right? Like, nobody touched it in 10 years because it's working. I don't understand this, because what I also usually say is, like, I grew up in the Linux world when we had no hardware support, right? For me, all the stuff, people had to put hundreds, if not thousands, sometimes even a team of 5 people had to put thousands of hours in to get the stuff working, and now, besides it's working and there's no real technical need and stuff, like they just delete it. It makes no sense, and especially given all the work it took to put in there. And there's, of course, the other thing that maybe you have on your list, which I would also have not engineered the Linux kernel the way it is, because like for me, I would prefer a stable API, which the Linux kernel has not. And so if like other operating systems, there would be a stable API, and you could have these drivers in binary form staying there and have this supported for 5 or 10 years, that would also be cool. But given the fragile and intentionally breaking nature, the Linux kernel argument is like, we want to optimize and we want clean code. And so the only reason those drivers break is because the Linux kernel people constantly refactor the code. Right. They sometimes just rename, they rename put to delete or delete to put. Sometimes, I mean, usually they say the name is better, right? Sometimes it's a rename, sometimes it's like they don't need an argument anymore. It's often such trivial stuff, right? Like an argument like put something or initialize whatnot, and the last argument might be Boolean, like delete or initialize or whatnot. And so it's like often someone sees no driver is using that except one or whatnot, and so it's like, yeah, let's remove this argument because like only this one driver used it. And this is how usually stuff breaks. And sometimes the name has even got worse. Like recently they renamed something where it's like they renamed remove to put or so. It's like, dude, how is put disk, or is it like some block layer stuff like a year ago? I was like, dude, how is this name is not even better. It's like, to me, this name is worse. But that is how the stuff constantly breaks, and why the P3 support every quarter. The last year, every quarter upstream broke P3 support, right? With some rename and refactoring and API. And the irony is the P3 support is upstream, and currently it's broken, and it was, and I think for the last decade, PS3 support, like Sony, PlayStation 3, I think it was for 90% of the time in the last 10 years broken. Like I or others usually fixed it. And it's even currently broken because I sent something upstream and it's like, yeah, it's white spacing, but it's like, okay, whatever. So what I sent upstream is not even in there because so currently the disk PS3 disk driver corrupts the data. Took me off. And so it always takes me like usually a day or weekend to find such things. Why does my PS3 not work anymore, right? Because they cleaned some stuff up and now it's corrupting the data. And yeah, the last year, every quarter they upstream broke. Once was ELF ABI, they changed PowerPC, the ELF ABI so that broke also hypervisor interface. They broke the storage stuff, and it's like, and previously other stuff broke it, like open device tree stuff, and for the greatest, and that's in tree, which like I'm thankful that it's in tree. Like, please don't delete it, because if they delete it, it's even more work for me to maintain. But that is upstream. But Itanium, which was working, it's deleted. So yeah, I would just let it in there. The argument also there is no maintainer, but I would simply as long stuff that's stable, I would say doesn't really need an active maintainer. It's not like it. Like it's feature complete and working, and it doesn't need someone to touch it every month. And if someone changes some API, it's some cool project, find and replace, it's fine. I wouldn't so quickly delete this stuff, but it's basically my personal opinion.
So unless it was, I guess, known to be broken, you probably would just say, don't touch it.
The thing is, so if Linux kernel would be my project, I would basically leave it kind of sort of in there forever until someone says like it's majorly corrupting data or whatnot, or like if it totally gets in my way. The other thing is like every quarter, and that's visible since I do, the reason I started to YouTube live streams because I was doing all the stuff here in my office and nobody has seen this, right? I saw all the YouTubers, I saw like also, and that's also like I basically wanted to do Linux influencing between all the Apple and Microsoft fans. And so now it's visible on YouTube how much work all this is. And the irony is like, even all the stuff that's upstream, I constantly have to fix, right? Relatively modern stuff, for example, the fiber channel either SCSI or fiber channel controller like QLogic, I fixed now 3 times in 6 years. That is in high-end workstations, right? Like they broke it, I fixed, and usually I often only notice a year later because I have 40 vintage machines here, Unix workstations. And so every other month I turn something on. And so it usually takes like a year, I turn something and it doesn't work anymore. Like, and so the QLA driver I fixed, they broke it 3 times. Sure, it works for some Intel machines by pure chance, but at least the way it's set up and configured on this Sun Big Endian Spark workstations, it's 3 times broken, right? And that's upstream. And that's with the maintainer because the maintainer constantly touches it, right? They constantly improve it and they constantly break it again. Mm-hmm. Other things, the SGIO2 frame buffer is currently broken. I've also not set sensors upstream. Basically, I'm so busy fixing this. People always ask me, like, why do I not send this stuff upstream more often? The point is I basically don't have enough time because, like, sending it upstream takes like 10 times more time, and my to-do is like still 600 lines long. Right. And each time, like, because the problem is, in my opinion, I also find this upstreaming process, like, people don't respond, and then there's like white spacing, and then there's like, my email client broke it, can you resend it with git send? It's like, I resend it. For example, I want to make it's on my list of YouTube videos. So I fixed GCC for Apple G5 and Power PCs, IBM Cell. It's broken since 4 years, and I sent it in 3 years. So I sent it upstream 3 years. I filed a bugzilla. I pinged them. I sent it to the mailing list. So what's happening is you compile your Linux stuff and you optimize for G5, Apple G5, or IBM Cell, which is more than PS3. There's also Blade servers and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like it's optimizing for Power 7 instead of Power 4, which so this is Power PC either level 4, but due to bug and GCC, it's a one-liner, right? It's basically one number. And what many people don't understand, it takes most experts, me or at IBM, like, okay, maybe at IBM, maybe it takes them 1 hour, but because I don't look every day into GCC, like it easily takes me an afternoon to understand like what's even happening, analyze, debugging the compiler. And it was like one line's like, and they changed it, right? Like it broke through cleanup. It worked for a decade. They cleaned the code up for cleaner code, and they broke some early PowerPC optimizations. Right. Like basically everything before Power 7 when you have Altivec turned on. So I filed the bug, nothing happened. I pinged them, nothing happened. I sent it to the mailing list, nothing happened. I pinged them on Twitter, nothing happened. And so eventually someone's like, but have you filed a bug? It's like, yes, here's a bug. Okay, have you pinged the mailing list? Yes, I have. Okay, can you ping again? So I ping the mailing list. So like a month ago, I was like, hey, by the way, this 3-year-old bug, like, can you finally apply it?
Just send a letter to Linus's house. That'll get it.
Yeah, send a letter to IBM or the Free Software Foundation. But the funniest thing is, you will not believe. So now last month, I was like, can you please finally apply this patch? And then the maintainer of PowerPC at GCC is like, he replied, yes, this one line, yes, that looks valid. Can you write us a test case? It's like, no, I should also write a test case for you. It's like, which, I will probably do live on YouTube because the problem is, I mean, that is a little bit procrastination, right? Like I should have, the problem is I'm probably not good at saying no. Because now 4 weeks passed, because I thought, hey, now I can do it live on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But because like basically I have so much to do, and it's like I should do it. But I should have said, realistically, I should have said, yeah, that's a good idea. Please write the test case. I can review it for you. So because I understand now, like now doing all the stuff so open on YouTube, I understand and reflect much more. And so in a way, it's of course super stupid that someone from IBM asks some external contributor to write a test case for them, and puts even it's basically like burning out open source developers and all the free asking free contributors to contribute even more for free, which had I not this YouTube channel, I should have said, yeah, this is a great idea, please do it, and I review the patch, or I review your test suite, or I test your test suite for your stuff, right? In a way, it's stupid that I didn't respond like, so much work. Okay, I do it on YouTube, but now 4 weeks have gone, right? And this is also how those in the open source community who already do so much, like overload them, like basically wanting to do perfect, and then because they want to be perfect, stuff falls through the cracks and people get burned out having too much to do, and yeah, it's not ideal.
See, I can tell that you're used to streaming because I can send you down a topic and you talk for 20 minutes and I don't have to say a single word.
I mean, I wasn't very could take a time, and I was actually thinking like if it's a successful format, we could do this sometimes, because I guess like once a quarter might even be popular to share some. Yeah.
Sure, I'd be more than happy to do this again at some point. Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot to say after 25 years.
Well, I guess we probably should talk more about the actual project, because we've gone like down random tangents. One thing I did definitely want to ask about is, so T2 SDE, the SDE is System Development Environment. What does that actually mean in the context of this project?
It means to develop firmware or embedded systems, and it's basically we took this popular IDE, like Integrated Development Environment, and applied this to the whole Linux system. So basically, it was meant to be the whole IDE for integrated system development, because an IDE is just your one program, but that's basically compiling all your system. And what T2 does is basically T2 bootstraps everything from out of nothing. Cross-compiles, for example, PowerPC RISC-V, and Spark and Itanium, which is also why with so few developers we can support everything. It's also very low code, right? It's recently we realized it's actually a very low code packaging environment, where if you package stuff like Pipewire and Firefox, you usually need to write much less code, and in much more systematically sorted way, also with patches, like unbreaking GCC, we try to patch stuff as little as possible, but because of all the constant changing environments and libraries, of course we have to patch stuff for new GCC, for new libraries, or RISC-V, or Itanium, restoring Itanium support. And so, but we don't like patch graphics, we don't patch render wording, we only patch it when it's necessary, right, technically, and we also have all those patches nicely sorted in the source tree. Other distributions sometimes tar all the stuff up, so I find it much easier to work with than with many other systems. Others tar all the stuff together, then you always, as a developer, you need to untar this archive and pack it back and together. Some other distributions also don't version so everything in T2 is versioned, also the patches. Some other distributions and build systems maintain patches not versioned, meaning like GCC Linux patches, they come from unversioned, not in version control, like mirrors, like it's coming from distribution XYZ, mirror patches, whatnot. And I in general don't like this, because as a developer, I would always need to grab those patches first, and they need to be on a mirror and stuff. So in T2, this was what Rock Linux has been 25 years ago and still is today, that everything is nicely sorted, as simple as possible. It's also scripted in shell. Some people find it low-tech, but most developers find it maintainable and readable. And it keeps everything. It's basically built very simple, minimal build system, kept as simple as possible to build all the 5,000 packages we have.
So if I wanted to set up T2 SDE on my system, what am I getting myself into? Like, where do I start, and where do I go from there?
Yeah, so you can just download a pre-built binary ISO. That's like a gigabyte. It's relatively minimal, but it includes these days all of Xorg, Firefox, XFCE, and Wayland. That is probably pretty compact for what we deliver, including like I'm basically live streaming from such an ISO. You can just fully work on this. You have Firefox, and then use it. Like, it's super simple. It's not that much. I mean, given it's a text installer and you need to know a little bit about the inner workings of a computer, it's not as simple as macOS, but I wouldn't call it. It's as simple as a BSD, right? Like
Sure.
if you can, we probably need to make it more simple. We recently started to make it more simple, but it's not super challenging. And from then you can just install packages from source if you wanted. Like if you want to install some terminal or some shell or LibreOffice or other KDE and GNOME stuff, you can just as a BSD or Gentoo. Some people, by the way, call T2 the BSD of Linux distributions. That is something what pretty many call us. And so you don't need to, like, it's basically as easy as NetBSD, OpenBSD, FreeBSD, or Gentoo. And you don't need to, like, obviously, we don't expect normal users to rebuild their system. And the benefit is users get an up-to-date system and it's optimized for their CPU, right? Like, unless you have a super slow vintage system, if you have something halfway decent, because there's always a discussion, like some distributions switching to the next x86-64 version 3, 4, 5, 6, AVX 512 enablement stuff. So with T2, there is not such a discussion. You just emerge all your stuff for your native CPU if you want to, and get the highest performance, even on PowerPC, MIPS, and Titanium.
I'm curious about that BSD comparison, because I'm not really sure what you meant by that. Like, calling it the BSD of Linux distributions. Being simple and this install from source, right? You have this package source tree, and like it's basically you have this pre-built minimal system that's quite similar to install. It's also like minimal and lightweight, and you just emerge the open source world there from your package source tree, which is pretty. It's of course it's not derived from that, but it's quite similar in concept. Okay. So I guess the obvious question is, if it's source-based, the main source-based distro that people go with nowadays is Gentoo. What is it about the way that T2 SDE does things that provides words are hard sometimes. What is we're going to try this again slowly. What does T2 SDE do that would convince someone who is a Gentoo user to maybe want to use it?
Yeah, for users, it's a tough call, given that there are 2,000 Linux distributions. That is true.
Yeah.
It's more for the professional way, right? If you want to ship a product, security product, a virtualization, or like orchestration, right? Your virtual deployment, it's then probably more suited for developers and like all those modern virtualization and you want to create a firmware. Satellite box are certainly out, like an AI box or all the modern stuff, some firewall appliance, some storage server, all the different, like some Linux cube for the office or stuff. Then or like any other, like all the embedded stuff, right? Like you have any embedded project. I mean, we have even people using it for environmental controls, right? And once we even did some project with UPS, right? So like even UPS is this parcel service. They're using this like so for end users, it's tough. That's true. So basically for developing systems, sure, I'm biased, but I think the more simple and organized structure and the there is, in the meantime, like a decade later, there is some cross-compile supported Gentoo, some cross-Gentoo or whatever. I don't follow all those details. So there is something, I don't know if it's in mainline Gentoo or if it's so there might be something for cross-compiling, but that's, of course, the main strengths of being able. So what might shock most people is that all those ISOs, we have 36 release. So we might have the most official supported CPUs and build variants. Build variants meaning alternative C libraries like Musel, the more minimal and potentially faster Musel, or alternative C compilers like LVM Clang. So we have 25 CPU architectures in 36 variants, like glibc, Musel, and stuff. And that might be the most of all Linux distributions. And what is probably shocking most people is that I cross-compiled all of them on just one single Ryzen 7950X, not even, sure, relatively high spec, but like I can build all 36 ISOs on T2 cross-compile them, Itanium and stuff, everything, in, what was it, 24? I forgot, if either 24 or 48 hours, like less than 2 days, whatever it was. Maybe it was 2 days. Maybe it was 48 hours, but like on one single machine, right? And the reason many other distributions struggle, even like Debian, who want to support more architectures, is because they mostly natively compile everything.
Right.
And then they can't support MIPS or PowerPC anymore because they simply don't have fast hardware. And it took me also quite a lot of work to make even Firefox. We can cross-compile Firefox, right? Like meaning we compile Firefox for RISC-V on x86, right? It's cross-compiling on one CPU for another. And it just took a lot of work, right? We do this for 20 years. Like we did like 20 years ago, like 2003, 2004, we only could cross-compile the base stuff. And having, like in the meantime, we could cross-compile LibreOffice and Firefox, Rust. And that is certainly, it took tens of thousands of hours of work to keep all this, like set it up and package and test and debug. And that's certainly quite some achievement, including even OBS Studio, right? I cross-compiled OBS Studio for RISC-V. And that's probably the biggest flagship feature of T2.
So I know it's hard to compress tens of thousands of hours into something consumable, but what sort of work has gone into this cross-compilation toolchain to make doing all this actually possible?
It's mostly all the scripting and debugging, right? Because the problem is most packages are not written in a way, because people only develop on Debian and natively. They often are written in a way that they run binaries and stuff. And even other packages like Open Embedded is also one competing project for purely embedded stuff. They do a little bit of a shortcut. They run then those intermediate binaries that are often used, they run them through QEMU or other such emulators. And the problem with that is, so we don't do this. And the reason is, first, maybe three reasons. The first, I find it's a little bit a hacky solution. The second is it's slow. And the third is we don't have QEMU for architectures, right? Like if we would do that, we couldn't support Itanium because there is no Itanium QEMU. We could not, and many others. Like there are also other architectures that don't have a stable or not at all QEMU port. Sometimes they also remove it, right? Even in QEMU, it's not supported. So yeah, and so it was mostly. I mean, I should also say it's easier today. Like basically, all the hard work was basically 20 years ago, and like spreading this more throughout the open source ecosystem. Because 20 years ago there was even less notion of having proper cross-compile support, and even GCC, for example, like until some years ago, like maybe, like even we in T2, we didn't cross-compile C++, for example, because even it just always takes like dozens of hours to debug why it doesn't work, while the problem is also it often fails in totally obscure ways, right? You see this on my YouTube channel. Sometimes I sometimes have live streams like 4 hours just like debugging, like why does it not work? Like why is this so cursed? Why is random stuff happening? What is even going on here, right? And even it's just a lot of detail work, like, and making C++ work. Even Rust and Cargo, like nowadays, like that didn't even exist 5 years ago, but now more and more stuff needs Rust and Cargo. Just integrating Rust and Cargo to be somewhat properly integrated and cross-compile and working. This was like probably a dozen YouTube live streams, so it's easily hundreds of hours, right? That is what people don't see, and why I turned to this to be also a YouTuber, because people never believed this, right? Like, it's working. It's like, no, it's not working. It's only working because people put hundreds of hours in there making it work and debugging it and stuff, right?
Is that the reason you feel like? Oh, go on.
No, I only wanted to say, like, it's also like recently. Maybe you have this on your to-do, on your list there. I also stopped desktop Linux for like a decade. I don't know if you have this on your list. But like it took me, like the last year's live on YouTube, it took 1,000 hours just to get all of KDE and GNOME updated and working again, right? Just recently, like just 2 weeks ago, I live streamed 11 hours making most of KDE 6 working. And this is how much work it takes, right? Like this dependency, this new package, K opening hours, K indoor maps, one more dependency, and it's like 1 hour, another hour. At the end of the day, you worked 11 hours just updating all of KDE. And that's what people don't see and probably don't really value mostly for downloading Linux for free.
I think because most people, they use a distro like Ubuntu, they use a distro like Fedora, or even Arch or Gentoo, where they don't really have to think about anything that went into it. If you download Ubuntu, you don't have to think about most of the packages you install because it just comes as this big thing, right? Like, most of the drivers, you don't manually select, I want this package, I want that package. At least on something like Arch, you at least think about the individual things. So there's at least some concept there that maybe there's some work that goes into making that work. But when, like, I've got the list open of all of the ISOs, and just having this in front of you, just this by itself indicates just how much work goes into getting something like this actually functioning. And I don't know, I hope that goes at least some way to making people appreciate that kind of work. But I did definitely want you to expand upon the KDE and GNOME stuff, because my understanding is, so KDE with their library stuff, they used to have it as one like big ball of libraries. So it was like a 500 megabyte library package, and they split that out into individual packages so that you wouldn't be installing every single KDE library just to install one application. But now that means there's, I don't know how many different library packages, 200 different, I don't know, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you can expand more upon, like, what dealing with that is like, and then just the general issues with getting these big desktops actually, like, working.
Yeah, I think it wasn't that large. I said this while I was doing that, and I remember it probably was more like 30 megabyte, like KDE Ellipse or so, like 20 years ago, like KDE 3. I hope it was only 30 or 50 or whatnot. Hopefully not 300. But my memory might be wrong. But it probably wasn't that huge.
KDE Dev gave me that number, so I don't know. But they might have been exaggerating as
well. But so the problem is, for me, it doesn't even have much of a benefit. So I understand, like, fine-grained dependencies and stuff, these are great. But the problem is they are hard requirements anyway, right? So I only packaged all of this, like, hey, opening hours. It's probably some like parsing email in, or like map, like business listings or so, I guess. There's so many dependencies, I don't even know what they're doing, right? It's only from the name. And there's even indoor maps, right? So I only packaged all of this because, like, I couldn't otherwise compile Kmail. All I wanted was have Kmail, the mail client building. And I don't think they're optional, right? So, like, if they are not optional, like, I would rather have like some PIM, like personal information management, like KDE PIM or whatnot, like some 30 megabyte thing instead of like 20 different. There's also like parsing this, like parsing MIME, and so so KDE, we have probably 400 KDE. I mean, I could check. It's probably 400.
The logic with the individual packages isn't necessarily if you're using KDE, it's if you install a KDE package outside of KDE. So if you wanted to install something like Dolphin and you're not on KDE, you don't have to download every single library, or Kden Live or Critter or something along those lines.
Yeah. I'm not so sure. So we even in T2, we have currently 445 KDE packages. That includes all of Dolphin and stuff.
Right.
So it's like probably 200-ish libraries or whatnot. But I mean, so I had to package all of them because they were hard dependencies. I don't know if you could somehow disable this, maybe. But to me, it looked like you need them anyway, at least most of them. So I don't know. I mean, also, there were really, really many, right? Like, it's like Plasma. There's even like activity and activity stats, and I needed them, right? It's not like I packaged them for fun. I needed them because I couldn't build stuff. Like I couldn't even build KWin, the window manager, or some desktop stuff without all of them, right? Like without activity stats and stuff. And this feels really, I mean, it's really excessively little, small stuff. And for all the 2000 distributions, there needs to be some maintainer who goes through all of them, package them, make them build, and manage the dependencies. And like 20 years ago, I was actually a KDE user. And so there, like 20 years ago, there were like 20 source tarballs, like KDE Base, KDE Ellipse, KDE PIM, and KDE Games, KDE Education, and then some, like probably 10 major source tarballs and like 10 languages, like KDE i18n, DE, US and stuff. I mean, 20 tarballs, like half a language, that was okay. Like now we have 400 or whatnot. With KDE, I mentioned this also in my stream, I'm not the most amused by the packaging because they have like 3 different version numbers. So they have some stuff that some stuff is 6.0, some stuff is 6.1 or now 6.2 since this week, and some stuff is 5 or 4. Like they have 3 different versioning schemes. Like this framework are 4 and the Plasma is 6 or whatnot. Right. And they also have like 3 major locations for download. So they, like even for me, it's like 3 times more work because each time I need to look, is it there? Is it there? Is it there? Like, and this is, I mean, not only did it take me like 3 times extra time, you always, then you miss something because there are 3 places, and then you miss some update, and it's very suboptimal in my opinion. But I mean, maybe it works amazing for them as a developer, but as a distribution maintainer, it's very verbose.
Well, they're not going to change that, but there is one thing they're working on that should make things slightly easier. Probably not for you, but for distros like Ubuntu. So GNOME has their release cycle like basically lining up with the Ubuntu release cycle, where every 6 months they have a new release. KDE is working on getting their libraries releasing that same sort of format, so they do these big releases every 6 months, and that should make it slightly easier for them to package, but it's not going to deal with the fact that you have 400 different packages you have to sort out, and make sure you don't forget any of them, make sure they all get updated and all compile correctly.
Yeah, I mean, now it's packaged, right? I mean, now they can just like, maybe just don't change it now because now we packaged all of them. Please don't touch it. Now it works. But as a developer, I mean, even as a, I mean, also software developer, professional software developer, right? Like even as a, like it's really many small libraries, right? It feels a little bit like this. I don't know if you've seen the Rust cargo microdependency hell.
Yeah, it's the same thing that the web has, where you have these little libraries where it's like 10-line long libraries. Like that doesn't need to be its own library.
Yeah, I mean, K opening hours probably can't do so much stuff, right? Or K indoor maps, right? Like it's, and also, I forgot to point this out in my live streams. I would also, as a software developer, I would say this is not, in my opinion, not the best way implemented, because I would say that the stuff should be more optional. Like if you build Kmail, it shouldn't require this on building. It should have some flexible plugin infrastructure that, in my opinion, all those opening hours and stuff should be more like add-on plugins, so that you build Kmail without all this stuff, like basically the core, and the other stuff should be plugins, like having it external libraries, but being maybe hard dependency. I have to say maybe, because now we have 24 build systems. Like it's also my fighting windmills here. A decade ago we had 10 build systems and they all sucked, and everyone invented another build system, and now we have 24 build systems that suck even more, right? Because nowadays I have to say maybe hard dependency, because 20 years ago when I was young, you did configure, and usually, yes, auto-conf sucked, I know, I'm with you, but now we have CMake and Meson and Ninja and stuff. But like now, in my opinion, it's super stupid that usually the CMake stuff, like the superior CMake stuff, I don't know if it's hard even, because I, as a packager, I run this stuff, it tells me like, hey, opening hours isn't there, right? And then I would need to do extra work to look up, is it really like, could I disable that? I didn't check. I mean, the stuff told me it's not there, so I packaged it. It is possible that maybe you could disable it, which 20 years ago, it was always like, it only built what was there, what was optional. Nowadays, most packages I've seen, they hard code this, and most things are on. And in CMake, for example, and you would need to manually disable it, which I find stupid. Like I would like, if I configure, I would like the stuff I have use. It was how it was 20 years ago, and nowadays it's like some arbitrary choice of some developer, and most stuff is on. So maybe it could be disabled, but I would still find a core Kmail and optionally dynamically loaded plugin stuff for advanced indoor maps and other goodies and opening hours preferable, but that's how it is, yeah.
So you brought up the whole thing about there being like 2,000 different distros before and how they all need to worry about packages. One thing I will say is most distros are just not real. Most distros are basically just a glorified post-install script. They just use the Debian repos or the Ubuntu repos or the Arch repos. Like, one thing you brought up in one of your streams, which you got very confused about and just hadn't heard of, was Garuda Linux, which is relatively popular amongst desktop users, but you got really confused. I saw you be like, what is this? What does Dragonize mean? I don't understand this. But like that, all that is just a post-install script for Arch in the form of an ISO, and all those packages, I think they might have their own little repo, but the rest of it just comes directly from the Arch repos.
That's probably another thing. Like, remember last week's call when things happened. What we also wanted to talk about is like getting PR, right? So it's basically coming back to that. That is so sad for us. Like, yes, our website is not the forefront of web technology because we spend all our time developing our distributions. But that is all those themed distributions getting more PR than like, hey, we support all the CPUs and build all the stuff. And nobody cares, but hey, someone made a Dragon themed distribution. That's
they also have an eagle. Their main one is an eagle, which is very. It doesn't matter at all. But hey, you open the website, you just see a giant picture of an eagle. What? So we last week wanted to also to talk about getting PR, right? So when that's also when I've sometimes, I mean, obviously I make sometimes funny and frustrated YouTube videos because it's just it's so sad, right? Like when you put so much work into that and then you get less PR than someone making a theme Arch post-install script, right? And especially this year, like this year and now I show all this live, right? Streaming this stuff, and like you write documentation and you write press releases, and you don't even know what you should do anymore. You try to do it like a big corporation, each year better and better, and still nobody writes about your project just because nobody knew about it. It's this chicken and egg, right? Like big media only writes about things that are big and known. And you're not getting big and known before, like doing all the stuff yourself and starting your own YouTube channel to do your own PR to fix it. So that's with all the 2,000 news distributions. Like, that's. I know you specifically pointed out like Phoronix and like a lot of the articles being like, oh, here is we added support for some controller, or it's like here's a GCC release candidate, or just like random little things like that. Why do you? Sorry. What I was gonna say. I love the delay on Discord. It's great. What I was gonna say is, why do you feel like T2 SDE just doesn't get like any sort of media coverage, even from outlets like Phoronix, who seem to just cover basically everything?
Phoronix, I don't know. I think though also has some preference for some other Linux distributions, but it's not only for Ronix. I criticize, to give him credit, he wrote about us once, a year or two ago. So there's that. But it's not only for Ronix, though. Although I would say I would appreciate if they write about, because like every second or third post is like some release candidate or stuff. I think his news site would, like the space would probably be better spent on some actual news and not like some release candidate or other rumors or other discussions. But it's also others, and it's even like our big local news here in Germany. And I mean, the biggest thing is we are not yet big and known, right? It's this, I think for the most part, it's this chicken egg problem. Before you are big and known, and then it's also not sexy enough, right? Which, like if it would be flashy with a dragon and like what, which is also why I keep. Not only I want to use my PS3, but because I think it's like fun to sometimes use, and we will definitely do more interesting stuff with it. But it's also why I keep some of the systems maintained, right? Like certainly, like having P3 maintained, having Ateneo maintained, having SGI MIPS maintained, brings all those exotic users and developers to us and gives us at least some extra attention. Of course, otherwise it's like too developer and build system, too technical. Certainly, we need to improve our website. We worked a little bit on that, but it's like developers trying to do website. But yeah, everything also. After all, it's. My company is somewhat behind it, right? Like I have an IT company. Like without my IT company, probably T2 would not exist since a decade anymore. So I have my business behind it, right? Like otherwise it would already not exist. But like even there's only so much 10,000 hours you can pour into your side project in your company, right? Sometimes you need to do some customer projects and stuff. But yeah, gaining. It's probably each startup, right? Like each startup visibility, getting into the media, it's difficult. Probably everyone would agree. And it's also like if it would be brand new, maybe we would get more news coverage if it would be brand new. But it's 20 years around, and probably we're probably in some vicious cycle of like people use it, it works, it's great and stuff, but because the media sees it's around 20 years and there's not much media coverage, then it's probably not that newsworthy or something of that sort, I guess. It's just my analysis of the situation. But we're working on that, right? Like now that with live streaming and stuff, like now we can put even more resources in this. We made using T2 easier. We improved the website. Next we will improve the website more. And that's a boring thing, right? We want to do code, but then we need to improve the website so that news sites write about us, right? So it's not what we want to do. Of course, users like, yeah, but the website sucks. It's like you, but have you seen what our stuff can do? But that's why people buy Apple stuff, right? Because it's PR and marketing and
please don't make your site like the Apple site. I genuinely hate Apple's website. You have to scroll down 5 different images before you get anything literally of value. It's really bad now. It's nothing but marketing. Oh, marketing. Okay, now we get to something useful.
Yeah, that's true. I also recently discussed like why packaging KDE and GNOME. I even thought like the KDE and GNOME websites are not the most ideal if you open them, in my opinion. Not the most useful marketing, like some IRC chat, and I would say KDE and GNOME probably should copy some Apple marketing, maybe at least as their start image.
I can't speak for when you looked at it, but right now on the GNOME website, they have a button near the top that says Get GNOME. There's like a picture of a laptop, and then under that, Get GNOME. I don't know what the
KDE but it's not. So I just opened it, but it's not very flashy, right?
Sure,
like they don't have like some. I meant like both websites. I realize I'm a code guy and my website is not the best. But like KDE and GNOME are bigger. They have some big foundations and stuff. And so as someone who wants to see Linux desktop thrive for 25 years, I would say the start picture should be more productive, because
the
they have
KDE
some
picture
App
is
Store.
cluttered as hell. Like, I can't even tell what's going on this desktop.
Yeah, they don't show flagship productivity stuff. Like the GNOME screenshot is useless in my opinion. It's some web browser and App Store thing. And the KDE they show, I even had to Google what the apps are. The KDE website shows some Mastodon client and some IRC chat, right?
Yeah.
And they should show there's some amazing graphic applications, some Office, some. It's like, this is not really inspiring, right? Yes, my own website needs to be better, but I also don't have marketing. Maybe they also don't have marketing experts, but yeah. And even it took me a while, packaging this stuff, it took me a while to click around there to even get to the latest source list, right? But yeah, our website needs to be better. That's what people forget, right? Everything is so much work, and at the end, you don't only need to do all the code for 25 architectures, 5,000 packages, making KDE GNOME work, Rust, Cargo. Nowadays, GCC, LVM, Clang, Rust, Cargo, 200 libraries, Firefox, and stuff. And at the end of the day, also have a pretty website, right? So, and best a handbook and a wiki, and yeah. But we're working on it. We are. maybe matching to this. I'm not sure if you had this on your list, but I also had before 5 years ago, I had 1 decade of not using desktop Linux. Not sure if you had this on your list, which is also why our website is more outdated, right? I basically didn't touch the website for a decade because maybe matching to this KDE and GNOME, I thought it probably fits right now. So I used Linux desktop, exclusively used Linux since 1996, right? Okay. Which most people find mind-blowing, right? This was KDE 1 and GNOME 1 and so on. And Pentium 200, right? Or stuff and with Rock Linux, of course. And I used desktop Linux for everything. And most at that time, the year 2000, most people have never heard about Linux, right? I was using Office. Everything was perfect, right? We had eventually KDE 2, GNOME 2. Everything was mostly good. But then somehow, the desktop, every year, worsened for me. KDE broke stuff, GNOME broke stuff. Every year, we reinvented graphic stacks and stuff. And to a point where even I, as a hardcore kernel developer, and distribution maintainer, then around 2008, basically 8 years later, 2008, for me it was there was Compits and 3D desktop, and then they wanted to write stuff rewrite Xorg and Wayland and stuff, and audio broke.
And
then I run a distribution. Sure, I run an embedded distribution and stuff, but in 2008, it's okay, enough is enough. I need my desktop working, right? So we had this Power PCs and stuff. We did some Mac software, so I switched to Mac OS for desktop, like many people. And so that is why. But I still kept maintaining T2. Of course, we had huge virtualization projects. We had embedded projects. So for a decade, I actually didn't touch KDE and GNOME at all, which is also why we had to catch up with all the stuff now. And basically rediscovering the Linux desktop. But that is also, in my opinion, a sign of how lacking and maybe frustrating the desktop Linux experience is, right? If people like me moved away from the Linux desktop for a decade. So in T2, I kept maintaining the core, the kernel, the C libraries, compiler, even X, of course, X server. Give me black box, give me a terminal, I can work, right? Of course, I updated Firefox mostly, so of course Firefox was working, but with a decade of KDE and GNOME not updated, of course it was thousands of hours of work. But that also shows how lacking the Linux desktop, in my opinion, probably still is. Like, I am now back to Linux desktop since 3 years, and I even live stream with OBS, and I have like most things working. But realistically, I have to say, I would wish by now the Linux desktop would be in a more mature, everything perfectly working state, which in my opinion, unfortunately, I have to say, it's not really. I might even go as far as say in 15 years ago, like 2006 or whatnot, 2006, 2008, maybe stuff was working more stable. Now, I mean, the world also became a more difficult place, right? With all the crazy incompatibilities with smartphones and everything, more proprietary formats for sharing files and whatnot, like Apple's pages and numbers and stuff. But sure, we have LibreOffice, but sure, if you run, of course, you can run, I mean, I do, and you can run most things with Firefox or Chromium. You have a PDF viewer. Sure, you can get stuff done, but I would argue the Linux desktop leaves a lot to be desired, and I think we would be in a way better state if we would not constantly rewrite stuff. Like if we would just focus for a decade on perfecting everything, making every smallest corner just work, audio, for example, and not reinvent everything every 5 years. I think this would greatly improve desktop Linux acceptance.
Well, speaking of things that just should work, I'm going to tell you about a bug that me and one of my mates discovered in KDE, because it's really stupid. So you know how KDE has all these like fancy desktop effects, like their overview thing, and they've got like an alt tab and all of this like fancy whatever they want to call it. So, turns out that they don't load these effects into RAM. Every time you use one of these effects, they are read from disk. So if it is on a slow hard drive, that can cause your entire desktop to lock up for multiple seconds.
Yeah, and I mean, it was also like 2008 when I left the Linux desktop for a decade. It was also even then that stuff became like basically the KDE 4 and GNOME 4 or whatever rewrite. They were so slow, right? I mean, back in the day, I had good hardware, but not the state-of-the-art hardware. But like basically everything also, like I didn't want to buy every year's greatest computer just to have KDE and GNOME snappy, right? And the craziest thing is, I mean, the running gag is of course audio, right? And which the irony is, I mean, not only that last week we had some problems, but the irony is like, for decades I had working audio, right? I never had so many audio problems like today. And for basically a decade, I was joking, like for a decade, everyone came to me like, this problem with audio, that's not working. And I was always like, what is the problem? Like everything is working for me. Turns out, like I was not using this modern audio stuff. I just was using raw ALSA. So for me, everything just worked for 20 years because I was just using ALSA, and all the other people used this modern audio demons, which I never liked. And now, that's also so stupid, where even there, the bugs are, in my opinion, like even I have to debug things an hour here, an hour there. And even today, I was using Pipewire, right? Wait, Pipewire, Pulse Audio, right? Pulse Audio. I was using Pulse Audio, and I got that to mostly work and behave. And then we switched to Pipewire. And now, only after our last call, last time, I figured out, I actually forget about this. I knew about this bug. So on my Ryzen motherboards, Pipewire doesn't route any default audio, and only last week I debugged why, because somehow this ALSA driver or whatnot thinks there is no headset plugged in when it is. And that's also so stupid, right? And then, I mean, not only that this is stupid, but then instead of just routing it there, when that is the primary audio device, it's deciding to route it to some dummy null thing. It's like, how is this a sane choice? This is basically Linux desktop not working when, like, sure, headphone detection, one thing, maybe it's that, whatever, but like not routing it to the primary audio device, but just trying to disable it because there's nothing plugged in. Like, I mean, besides, you could have some line out speaker plugged in or whatnot. But I mean, these are these crazy decisions that I don't understand. Like, how is this a sane choice to stop rooting it and like actively making the decision to stop rooting it to the only audio device? And it's like, this is just so silly, right?
Well, the other joy of Pipewire is because on Wayland, Pipewire is the way we do video capture as well. So I have this fun issue where if I'm capturing my main monitor and then I change the input of my monitor over to my HDMI, if I'm like trying to capture my console and I want to see it on my screen, that causes the capture I have in OBS over Pipewire to basically have a null object attached to it. This causes Pipewire to constantly segfault every time I change my audio level.
Yeah, fun bugs. But it's also because we have to rewrite. Like, I understand rewriting and cleaning stuff up, and people coming there and says this, like a decade later, the design wasn't good. Let's redesign it. But there's also a limit. Like, maybe we should do it half as often. I mean, I have not a gold solution except like do it half as often or design it better from the beginning, or like every other company would like retroactively fit it in there, like add video capture to Pulse Audio. And yes, maybe that would suck and whatnot, but like the breaking of compatibility, and it's like for drag and drop, for windowing systems, for like every small little thing breaks, right? I have to say so. I mean, except for the decades that I used macOS a little bit, which I always run our T2 on servers and virtualization stuff, but I otherwise use fully desktop Linux. And I have to say, I used macOS extensively, and it also isn't perfect, right? I would also argue it also becomes increasingly buggy. Like now that Steve Jobs is not there anymore and there's no oversight and they put everything in they want in there and whatever. And Microsoft as well. Since I never used Windows, like really for me and my stuff since 1996-ish or whatnot, most people like, I only start virtual machines for reverse engineering or like having to touch some project code in Visual Studio shortly, but that is like nearly never. Like people really need to give me painkillers like for days for me to touch Windows even in the VM. So it's not like Windows is amazing. Like I could not use Windows. And the crazy, I mean, but I understand that normal people are used to this, and some things sometimes were maybe a little bit better, but like certainly Windows for me sucks. And the craziest thing is that macOS, I mean, not only the modern macOS for me is a nightmare because everywhere the security nightmares. Do you want to allow this? Do you want that? And bugs and stuff, right? Like CIFS, Zumber file sharing is super slow for strange reasons and whatnot. But also multimedia is even better. And I mean, multimedia OBS runs better on T2 Linux than on macOS. On macOS, you can't even capture desktop audio without a third-party plugin, right, for security or whatnot reasons. So it's not like on macOS it's everything shining. It's like I was shocked. I wanted to make one live stream on the go from macOS. It's like couldn't even route desktop video. It's like what the heck? It's like yeah. Or other. I mean, then you capture your Mac desktop and you pen your desktop and it follows the panning and then it glitches strangely. So it's not like it's bug free. It's increasingly buggy, but it doesn't make it better that the Linux desktop could be better.
What do you actually run as your Linux desktop? What desktop do you run?
Currently, I use Simply Sway.
Okay.
With Alacrity. I mean, most people see me. I mean, this is so funny. The YouTube comments, like now that I have a growing YouTube channel, like the comments are gold, right? All the people like, this dude is not using syntax. How can you program without syntax highlighting? It's like,
wait, do you not use syntax highlighting? You don't use syntax highlighting?
Sometimes not. I mean, I don't.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes I have it on, sometimes not. But I don't need it, right? And like, for example, I don't even realize when it's off. Like I disabled it recently because like the latest Vim version colored diffs so strange, like patch files, right? Like it's like pure color cancer and so strange low contrast. Like light blue on pink or whatnot. It's barely readable, right? It's like I just disabled it because like this patch was so full of color. It's like who should read this? And I didn't even notice that I turned it off because of this patch thing. And then people whine like I can just code, and people like, yeah, how can he code without syntax? Like who cares? But yeah, the comments are really fun. And then also like all the people like which desktop, which editor, which
I'm sure people are like, hey, why don't you try out Hyperland? Why don't you try out this one? It's like...
Yeah. I mean, basically, so that's also how I work on all the vintage systems, right? Like some of the vintage systems don't even have either no graphic or non-working graphic or not supported graphic. And it's like, yeah, serial console, and just give me a terminal, and I can even work on a unisolated frame buffer in Vim, right? It's fine. But so for a decade, I actually, like since KDE and GNOME became too resource hungry for me, I just give me X server, and for a decade I run Blackbox. Now I run Sway. I tried Hyperland. It's fine. I mean, I tested KDE and GNOME. Our default ISO ships with XFCE for end user feeling at home and pixel art. Yeah, Firefox. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Then people desperately want Chrome. We have a Chrome package, but it's too often broken. Most core developers don't love Chrome the most it does. That's funny that so many users love Chrome so much when developers don't. Some areas still need some. Yeah, the next 10 hours live stream making Chrome fully work. Yeah, I need surprisingly little, but I'm aware that most people need all of KDE and GNOME. But then even in KDE, even the PDF viewer was broken, right? Like even that I had to debug, like why does Okular not load its rendering plugins and stuff, right? And where you have to wonder, like, why does this stuff not just work? It's sure, I mean, people in Debian and SUSE fixed that too, but like, why does it not work out of the box?
Actually, one thing I want to ask, because you are using Sway, why didn't you just go and use some X11 window manager? Why did you bother using Sway?
I mean, I did until recently. I mean, only because like I was using Blackbox, like even on my early YouTube videos, I was like doing all in Blackbox, I believe, because that's all I need, right? I need to move some windows. That's fine.
Right.
I only started because people, like all the people were bugging me, like, can you support Wayland better in T2? Like, we want Wayland support, Wayland. Like, okay, fine, I do Wayland. So I only did it because like everyone was whining to me, they want the latest and greatest. And then I obviously need to test it. And then I switched to it and it was eventually working. And then it's I mean, I got used to it. It's mostly fine. And yeah, I need to test the latest and greatest, right?
Fair enough.
And then I've the first most stable compositor there, Wayland compositor, Sway worked for me with OBS and yeah, Hyperland too. I mean, I need surprisingly little, but we have just recently I cleaned up some vintage window managers, so like we have dozens of all the vintage stuff, right, from i3 to Awesome and Red Poison and IceVM. So if someone wants to use T2 as a desktop, you will feel at home no matter what. And patches welcome, right? Like if we have over 5,000 packages, so if something, I mean, surely we have FPGA toolchain, Yosys, and KiCad and OBS, but certainly I'm aware that other distributions have more than 5,000 packages, although the numbers are skewed, right? People always like only 5,000 packages. Yeah, but Debian also splits them, right? Like we don't split them, so Debian has Devil and Doc and whatnot. So like 5,000 true packages without artificial dev doc splitting.
One thing I really do appreciate with your package listing is you don't have some annoying search to find packages. It's just a giant list of packages on the website.
Yeah, it's old school. I mean, once upon a time, this Google custom search was working, but Google stopped the service somehow. I need to still delete this custom search.
You still have the bar there.
It's like, yeah, we have Itanium to support. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, the website will significantly increase the next month, is my promise. And yeah, I mean, we do all this all our work at Exacode with T2, right? Desktop, FPGA development, Yosys, KiCad, there's the electronic cat. I'm gaming on T2 since the year 2000. That's this next. Like, what's next? Next, we will improve the website. We will probably have to fix. We will iron out some last. With 5,000 packages, there's always one last thing that doesn't build right now, like Chromium. We will fix some build issues, update Chromium because people are asking. And we will probably also, probably what most people don't know, we have not even mentioned, theoretically we support building Homebrew on macOS and BSDs. So using the T2 build stuff to build on other systems. We probably should expand on that.
Yeah, sure.
So we also use this in production. So like on our Mac development systems, we build like stuff we need on Mac OS, we build with T2, like libraries and stuff. And QEMU, like for developing Mac software, we sometimes develop, like we run this on QEMU built with T2 Homebrew on Mac OS. But it's not, like it's proof of concept. So we probably should build this out a little bit more. So basically, you could do all the things with T2, Homebrew, embedded desktop. And maybe that's also what most people don't understand, because like it's just so much, but it's with really simple code. Most people will be surprised how simple the code is. Readable shell code and like not obfuscated thousands of libraries and frameworks. And the package is also really low code, right? Like zero, like if a package is not totally cursed, it could be built with T2 with zero code for packaging. Most distributions have a lot of code for building the RPM and dep and stuff. And if it's not zero code, then at least it's low code. Like if you need to quirk something to make a package build, it's very, very, very little var assignment and hooking stuff or patch. It's extremely simple. Stupid simple.
So what do packages actually look like on T2?
So the source packages are some really simple key value format for the metadata. I mean, you could click. I mean, I can't easily share because I'm using Sway. I can't just share. But if you could just click on.
Direct me to somewhere on the website I can go to, or something I can go to.
Yeah, if you go to Vim or so and click on there's this T2 source listing, and you click on the desk, so the Vim desk there. Yeah, maybe Vim desk is. You find that.
Sorry, what was that?
Like on the T2 website,
yes.
In the package listing, if you go to Vim.
Vim. Oh god. Vim. Am I hearing?
Or any other.
Oh. Okay. Yep. Sure.
And you see this, if you see this package listing, and there is at the middle somewhere this T2 source stuff, and there is like Vim desk. It should be some key value thing, like it should be some brackets.
Yep. I see.
Like IT, like it's like header, like information header, text, and like basically what T2 does. So that's basically the package format. It's a little bit old school. It's like basically like TOML and YAML. Like it's just we invented this 20 years ago before there was TOML and YAML. But we are basically not changing it because like it works. Like it looks like array assignments, something like what you could have done nowadays with TOML and YAML and stuff. And so basically T2, like that's basically all it's needed. T2 will basically figure out, it will unpack the sources, that it's like the D is the download stuff with a checksum. And so the T2 build system will download this, extract this, and figure automatically out what's in there. Is it a makefile, CMake, Meson, Ninja, and stuff? And like usually it will automatically just build, unless like if it doesn't build, like if it needs some code, you can add code or patches. There might be, there's even a hotfix install patch. Like if something, this is so stupid. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to click on the hotfix install patch. But so yeah, if you need a patch, just drop it in there. And if you need to add some code to set some configure options, it's just adding like package, like some other package install dependencies and add, disable, enable, whatnot. So it's extremely, like it's either zero or very low code packaging. And T2 will do all the stuff automatically, like only packages like the Linux kernel, GCC, LVM Clang, Rust, they have some more complex scripting that is shellcode, like in Gentoo, for bootstrapping, for all kinds of conditions. And
what is
if you
what is your
want
Linux kernel package called?
as a Linux kernel,
Is it?
if you go, that's just Linux. If you
Oh,
go
it's
to
just
the
called
Linux
Linux.
package.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there we have some 60 packages because we have some architectures to maintain them.
I've got to scroll through this big list of things to find where Linux is, because Linux is a keyword in a lot of things. Okay, here we go. Found it. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
that's
see
the most,
what you. Oh, and you got quite a few patches here as well.
that is probably the most patched. So usually we patch nothing except like the Linux kernel. Yeah, there is some stuff going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to not patch stuff, but like there is hotfix. Like, I mean, sure, some stuff I implemented newly. There are some completely new drivers from scratch for me in there,
Mm-hmm.
like including I've written live on YouTube. Like, if you want to see my stuff live, you probably can drop a link to my channel. Like, I've written like there's the DDR5 driver for reading the SPD, EEPROM, and temperature. Currently, T2 is the only distribution that ships this because I've written it. I should upstream this soon. I've also recently written live the Xserve, Apple Intel Xserve front panel controller. Like, yeah, and we also have restoring Itanium, right? Of course, 000 IA64 is 3 megabyte restoring Itanium support. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, if you delete all the patches, it's still built, right? You just don't have all the hardware working.
Mm-hmm. Oh god, there's a lot of. Okay, right. Oh. Yeah, I'm sure the kernel was a fun one to deal with.
I mean, it only the last years got out of hand. Like, since I started to fix everything that isn't working live on YouTube, like since then it got a little bit out of control. But on the plus side, like everything is working.
Right.
Like
right.
SG Octane, SGO2, PS3. So like so some stuff is also not finished, right? Like, for example, the DDR5. Like, so if you want your DDR5 temperature, like don't delay, install T2 Linux today, and you have your DDR5 temperature sensor working. But otherwise, some stuff is also not. For example, for UltraSpark, I recently debugged why, like, my 8 gigabyte UltraSpark, like my highest end UltraSpark, isn't booting Linux. It's crashing very early. I debugged the whole weekend, and I'd still like I have a workaround for that. Like, so if you have an UltraSpark with 8 gigabyte of memory, you probably want to install T2 Linux because everything else crashes early in memory initialization. But I've not, like, in one weekend, I have not found the root cause. I have a workaround for that. That isn't pretty, but like I still need to fully understand the special high mem, like huge page bits there, and there's probably some serious huge page confusion going on. So that's why some stuff works but isn't pretty. Some, like last night, I fixed finally the Apple Cinema displays to work. So some stuff is new, and other stuff I really should send upstream. Also, the SGIO2 frame buffer I probably did last month. That like X didn't start anymore. Like, it's also like a decade-old bug. Like, it's like, yeah. I mean, if you have an SGIO2 and PS3, then I mean, you're busy finding regressions and fixing things. But it's also not fun to send some stuff upstream, right? It's just like 10 times. Yeah, I mean, it's just so much work, right? And because sometimes people criticize I should send more stuff upstream, but at the end of the day, like, I'm tired and want to go to bed, right? It's like, and then it's the next day, and new stuff is on your desk, and
right.
It's, yeah, I mean, I just maintain so much, right? Then it's like sending SGIO2 frame buffer, and when you're fighting GCC maintainers for 3 years to finally import the patches, like due. Okay, I mean, I mean, realistically, nobody else supports. Like, who else is supporting SGIO2, right? Or Octane? Like, what is the point of upstreaming if no other Linux distribution is there anyway? So
yeah,
this is big because it's the main criticism criticism people bring up. It's like, why is it not upstream? It's like, because nobody else cared and I didn't have more time. It's basically it. Yeah.
That is a really good point, though. Like, if even like Debian's dropped it by now for certain pieces of hardware, is there really a reason to upstream it if you're the only one who's actually going to make use of the patches?
Yeah. That's also why I really turn to YouTube, right? Like, because I want, like, to be honest, like, my company is my company is extra code, right? Like, we do code stuff and stuff. So, like, my company is since I founded my company in the year 2006, like, my company is pouring way too many. Like, realistically, like, every controller manager would already long said, like stop this money draining business. Like, I only do this because I want the stuff working, and it's my company, and like I can like everyone else like would have X'd this project long time ago. Of course, we have successful virtualization, security, like the reality is like everything pays better than maintaining this distribution, right? Like, we're getting paid for code, we're paid for code review, we're paid for consulting. Like nobody, like, okay, not nobody. Very few people pay us like good money to maintain Linux distribution. Like, literally everything else pays more than Linux distribution. And with YouTube, it finally allows me to put so much more work into that, making really everything work. And I should say it probably is worth upstreaming, because then it prevents the stuff from getting deleted, because then they see, hey, someone cares, and there was really a bug.
Right.
And many of the things I only did the last years due to this new video streaming business. And I will do increasingly sensitive stuff upstream. And also, and the sad thing is, coming back to this vintage and retro hardware, I just like this hardware, right? It's just like people collecting cars. I don't pay crazy prices. I mean, some of the stuff I got for free. I mean, very little I got for free. I mean, sometimes people donate me like, hey, you want to have the stuff? Like, sure, I want. I mean, some stuff I waited 5 or 10 years on eBay searches to get it affordable, right? I'm not paying $1,000 for an SG-Octane, right?
Right.
A lot of the stuff, like, I'm just lucky to watch the stuff for 5 or 10 years to get it affordable. And it's just nice collectible pieces. And there is still so much stuff I would do eventually now with this YouTube thing. 3D on a P3. We could, since 2010, we know how to do 3D on a P3. Just nobody had the time to do it. I did some proof of concept stuff. Proof of concepts. It's just hundreds of hours of work, right? So that's the fun stuff. I will eventually do it. Just a matter of time. We could do, like, only recently, the SGIO2 is new. I got this probably last year only. We could even do 3D on a SGIO2. I got it new. I will probably do it also eventually. A lot of the stuff is hardware acceleration. So, and that is the code that's being deleted, right? Like, people hating Xorg, but, like, sure, is it? I mean, it's museum collectible kind of thing. I get it, but it's still fun. And this is also, like, deleting the stuff is, in my opinion, also, like, taking the fun from this hobby DIY people who just want to enjoy the hardware. What else is here? I mean, theoretically, I have writing a microkernel on my to-do list. You might have heard this.
I did briefly hear a bit about that, yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the stuff is hardware, is 3D. I mean, yeah, there's also, but the 3D stuff is also fun. And I have done this, right? Like, because I've never written a 3D driver from scratch, which is why I tried this live on YouTube some 4 years ago with S3 Verge, this infamous deaccelerator. Like, I just wanted to see, like, how difficult is it? And turns out, like, at least for me, it wasn't difficult. And I mean, obviously, it's compared to modern graphics, not difficult. And I will expand on that. So other people want to delete this, but sure, the Xorg and Mesa card was old school. See, I get it. I just would not have deleted it. It's like security and stuff. It's like, yeah, you don't need to run state-of-the-art desktop and security on 3DFX Voodoo. You just keep this code around there and don't touch it much, but okay, fine, it's deleted. And so it's also educational, because with this old stuff, it's so simple. You can teach people in a YouTube video how to do it. With this modern stuff, like even I wouldn't, like I probably in a year, like a year full time, I would probably not be able to write a driver for latest AMD stuff, right?
Yeah, good
So
luck with
complex
that.
this modern stuff
Yeah.
is. Yeah, you need a whole department of AMD and Intel of maintaining the latest and greatest stuff.
Mhm.
And so that is also, like, from the educational perspective, like deleting code that at least is so simple, is theoretically so simple that people like hobbyists and DIY and young people getting into computer graphics could still understand. So so we will do some stuff with old school graphics there for sure the next years.
That actually does sound really cool. You've got a lot of stuff on your list for sure. One thing I will say about the microkernel is, look, as long as you can get it done before GNU Herd's done, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's also for educational reasons. I mean, I wish I wouldn't have to do it. I mean, but in retrospect, I said this a couple of times, like in retrospect, instead of, but I mean, you never knew, right? Like when we were like 16, there was this Linux thing. It's like, hey, let's do this Linux thing. Like, I mean, in one way, like Linux is one of the most successful operating systems, but on the other, not on the desktop, right? Or like even on smartphones with this Android thing, not so sure. It's basically not Linux, but Google Android, right? Like it's basically, if Linux is there or not, like it's even cursed vendor drivers. So maybe not really. And in retrospect, like if I had a time machine, but you never know, right? You don't know before like a decade passed and you've done all this stuff. Like if I had a time machine, I probably would go back in time and tell my younger self, like, don't do this Linux stuff, like do your microkernel, because like this is also, I mean, sure, I get it, performance, yes. the old performance argument. I mean, there are good microkernels like QNX and stuff, right? People always like there are no good microkernels. Like sure, there is a proprietary one. I just wish it wouldn't be proprietary. There's L4. I mean, a lot of people do stuff with microkernels. I mean, there is a security enhanced L4 stuff, SEL4, but this is also like so hidden from plain sight with some. I think even one is some Australian company very big in that, right? Not sure if they still exist. They did a lot of this formally verified, highly secure L4 microkernel stuff. But this stuff is just not so popular. Allegedly, it's running in a lot of million devices somewhere. I've personally not seen them, but that's their marketing. But I want this exactly for this kind of stuff, like driver compatibility, maintainability, and for research. Even if it will not be successful, like just for research, I will continue on this. I will probably do some low-level 3D graphic first, so probably like more Voodoo. And I'm not sure if I do the PS3 first because it's just so much more complex. And the hypervisor, like each time the hypervisor doesn't do something, it crashes so strangely. It's a little bit annoying to develop if each time something, if the hypervisor doesn't do something, it throws some GPU exception and you need to reboot. That's a little bit annoying. At least I have not yet found how to recover LV1 exception without rebooting. So maybe there is a way. I have not found. Probably there is a way, but I have not found it yet. But that's the thing. I said before, like, did Linux kill OS innovation? And it's like I wish instead of forking the 2000s Linux distribution, people would do more genuine research from scratch instead of just like, I mean, okay, to be fair, most people probably couldn't do it because they just changed some theming and package selection and some script. But I wish, I mean, there is some, right? There's a lot of stuff like Helen OS, and there is this German Geode OS people here in Dresden. I mean, people do some fun stuff, even with microkernel. Like they're both like microkernel-ish. Dragonfly BSD is a little bit hybrid microkernel-ish, they say. I've not particularly looked into that, but they say that at least. It's not like it's not existing. And I think it had, like for me, like 25 years in Linux, I wish stuff would be more driver, stable API, more compatible, more stable. Like I mean, even as a Linux kernel developer, I don't like my Linux kernel crashing when I write a USB driver and it clobber some stuff and you need to reboot or sure.
Right.
These days you can develop in a VM, but like at the end of the day, if it's in production, it's a customer, it still can crash the same way out of bounds if you overlooked some condition. And
Yep.
I thought for decades already, like stuff should even. I mean, there is no perfect code, right? As much as we all want perfect code, there's always, even in Rust, there's always some. Because what people don't understand, like Rust is only memory safe, not logic safe, right? You can still write, even if in the safest Rust code, you can still create logic errors that cause deadlocks or send the wrong packets or whatnot, or even the hardware stops responding on the PCI or USB bus or stuff. And then your Rust code deadlocks and stuff. I mean, sure, a microkernel cannot fully protect against this, but at least if it's 90% better, it would already be better than.
Right.
Your keyboard can crash your kernel, so it's not ideal.
Yeah, that's not the best state to be in. You know, I think at some point we need to do like a full episode just talking about the whole microkernel thing, because I feel like you've probably got a lot to say on that, considering that you've wanted to do this for a long time.
Yeah. We sure can. We are probably 2 hours in, right?
Yeah, I don't want to do that episode right now. We're almost 2 hours in. It's about hour 55.
Oh, no, I meant, it got long today.
Yeah, this is about how long I normally am to do it. So I think this was a fun episode. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. I hope the viewers like it and learn something. It's like I always say, I hope you enjoyed this and learned something. And copied this from Louis Rossmann with his hardware tinkering. So I hope viewers enjoyed this and took some new takeaways and things to think about, or certainly not low-level assembly stuff like I do at times, but like broader concepts of Linux and the ecosystem, and that the main opinion on Linux kernel, the main English proper, is not like what all the rest of the world thinks just because some big name people dictated like it, right? It's not like everyone is happy with it. And still keep Itanium around.
So I guess before we end off then, just let people know where they can find T2, where they can find your YouTube stuff, anything else you want to direct people to.
Yeah, T2 you find at t2sde.org, and I'm otherwise active now since recently, since the last 4 years on YouTube, youtube.com/René Rebe, or more René Rebe. Ironically, my More Life channel took recently more off than my good old content channel. How it is at times sometimes. And if you would be amazing. I mean, T2 is open source and fully free, right? So if you want to download that, play around at home, fire up a VM. Even on obscure hardware, PowerPC and libs and stuff, and latest RISC-V. And let us know if something doesn't work, or send a patch. That's the most amazing thing. Send a patch, like some typo, some package, some whatever you find and want to tinker with.
Awesome. And it might get fixed quicker than a year later when you eventually cycle to that machine and realize, oh wait, something doesn't work. If you maybe get a message about it, like, yeah, that actually doesn't work. Now does it?
Yeah, recently, I mean, we got now much better with all the community. The last 4 years we spent up modernizing all the desktop stuff and fixing obscure stuff and also new Rust stuff and audio stuff. But T2 is in really great shape now after 4 years of full-time development. And we are now much quicker. Like if you report something like some obscure stuff, like we usually fix it within a day or week. Like unless it's like crazy big stuff like Chromium or so. Certainly we have, for example, what I also with your views on YouTube, you directly support this development. For example, we still have to debug why Firefox is crashing on PowerPC. It's working on Little Endian, so of course we have modern open power Little Endian PowerPC. Their Firefox works on T2, but on good old Big Endian PowerPC, it's segmentation faulting in strange ways. And this stuff, like I debugged this for 8 hours already, but it's like, yeah, that's what all those views support these days. Fixing all the stuff like that, even the Mozilla Foundation wouldn't even take a look at.
I just realized we didn't even touch on the Linux Foundation, did we? We can save that for
Yeah,
another
we can
one.
make this a yeah, we save this for next quarter. So.
Awesome.
But yeah, I mean, there's really my to-do is, no kidding, my to-do is 666 lines long. There's like, yeah, we need Firefox on Big Endian, on Itanium, but that's a bigger thing. There's a lot of stuff, but now we increasingly do the fun stuff. Like, also, I mean, we have not even mentioned Hewlett-Packard precision architecture, right? So there's, but the future is of course in RISC-V, and that's also where we are at, and where we similar have to do stuff, right? We have Firefox on RISC-V already, but like, yeah, the next future of Linux desktop is then RISC-V and embedded, and so much to do.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to direct people to? Is that everything you want to mention?
No, that's basically it, I guess.
Okay, awesome.
And
yeah, I'll do my outro then. So the main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. They're going to be a lot less technical than what you'll see over on his channel. So if you want to see something, if you want to see a lot of code, go over there. If you want to see me rant about GNOME devs doing stupid things, come to my place. The gaming channel is Brody on Games. I stream there twice a week. Right now I'll be playing through Sekiro, and I'm doing a Pokemon stream with Ren, so check that out as well. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you want to find the audio, it is on every podcast platform. Search Tech Over Tea, you'll find it. Chuck it in RSS reader, you'll be good. So give me a final word. What do you want to say? How do you want to end us off?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a fun time, and for the viewers, have fun on your devices. Go fix some nice stuff or play with some vintage retro stuff. Embedded DIY hobby stuff, right? And looking forward to hear from you. Patch, email, comment, and hope you enjoyed this, learned something.
Awesome.